I'm Gentleman Josh Hill.
I'm Aaron Jeffrey.
I'm Johnson Jazz Busiest.
I'm Mike Malott.
I'm Ruffian Style.
Tune in to
Don't Tap
podcast.
Don't tap
podcast.
John Jones.
Follow me on Twitter.
Hey, I'm UFC President Dana White, and you're in the ring with Callum McGregor.
To me, the Lions are the number one rankings out there. Those guys are the ones who really do their homework.
Man, that's why saying the rankings are bullshit.
Hi, motherfucker from Canada.
We're here just to take part. We're here to take over.
Okay, here we are. UFC 289 is finally upon us. We are shooting this a little bit early. But even beyond us shooting a little bit early in UFC 289, we're pretty excited right now for this episode. Although we've had Billy Briz jumping on the episodes the past little while, and it's been amazing. We have somebody who we've used as a benchmark when we first started this podcast, somebody who that we would watch on a regular basis. And, you know, the idea of the stats and breaking things down finite. So there's no, I mean, you can add emotion to it after the fact, but it's really about the stats and breaking that down first. So I just want to introduce, a beacon, essentially, and I'll be as cheesy as hell, of MMA Twitter and the actual community itself. Uncle Weezy of Pub Sports Radio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for having me, you guys. It's always good to meet some of the newer people in the space and talk to them about all the things that we do on a weekly basis, which is just break down these fights, try to figure out angles where the bookies mess up, where we can make a little bit of money and make money doing what we love to do, which is watching fights, watching some of the best athletes in the world go into the cage and gut it out and do it for our entertainment. So it's always great to talk fights with people who enjoy it as much as I do.
It's amazing to have you on. I can't wait to chop it up and go over a couple spots. And as I said, we are a little bit early on this, so we've all not been able to watch full tape, but that's where the advantages of being able to go over, a couple key spots will help out us being able to actually drop some stuff early by just picking a couple spots each. So Weezy, what we did was initially we were doing full cards and, chopping it up and editing it and realizing that with the followers that we currently have right now as we're growing the podcast, there's not people watching the prelim stuff. There's not people watching a lot of those things. And it's more of our egos presenting that stuff out there, right? So we decided to bring a different model to it where we bring three pieces to the table. It could be an over-under, it could be a prop play, it could be a straight-up money line spot or dog spot. And then, we cross-section it together. Sometimes people have the same spots. That solidifies it as a good spot. Sometimes we get talked off spots. And then at the end, we try to build a parlay. But essentially, it allows people to even cap the capper. We bring on cappers, and you can bring your three spots that you like the most. And then we take a look at that and break it all down. So first, Nick, I'm going to let you take it away with your first spot of the week. And hopefully we can have Billy Briz jump on soon. I know he is a busy man as well, too. Nick, what is your first spot of the night for UFC 289 Vancouver?
Yeah, man, my first spot of the night is going to be going fading a Canadian here, and I'm going to go with Blake Bilder. It's definitely a fight that I need to look more into, but whenever I look back at the Jay Herbert fight, man, where he was just able to be controlled, I think Bilder is going to be very fast, very aggressive in this fight. I think he's able to land takedowns whenever he wants to, and whenever I look at a guy like Kyle Nelson, he's really only got one win in his last 5 fights and a draw against Doo Ho Choi, and honestly, I see Bilder just putting an absolute beating on him. He's got the cardio, although he seemed to fade a little bit in his last fight. He's just one of these guys that I think will be overly aggressive and could probably get a finish in the spot.
And what's the line currently sitting at right now?
It opened up at minus 210, and it's sitting right now at a minus 220.
Yeah, I think the line's just a little bit drastically wide on that one. I'm staying off that one, obviously, for reasons that, for me, I'm trying to stay off as many Canadian picks as possible. I think Nelson's being undervalued in this spot. Weezy, any thoughts on that fight?
That's one. So my initial thoughts is that I picked Blake Bilder his last time out. He wound up getting the win in his debut. Good performance. I felt like he won 2 out of the 3 rounds. And that was a fight that was lined very close, right? And I feel as if the bookies pretty much got it right. I mean, you got a little bit of plus money on Bilder, but that was a close fight, right? And now here he is against a guy that's a lot more experienced, twice as many fights, way more high-level fights too here. And it's not like Kyle's old and washed. So minus 200 for Blake Bilder, I would probably be, when I'm watching tape, looking for a reason to take Nelson, or maybe even asking myself, what's Kyle Nelson's best win condition? And if I could find that at 5-1, 10-1, like a round prop, a KO or a sub prop, then maybe I'm looking at something I can play a small bet on it. But no heavy lean one way or another right now. It's just when I see a guy in Blake Builder who's got less than 10 professional fights, and in his second UFC fight, after a close win, he's minus 200. Pass on Builder.
When you walk into the House of Champions, there's a big poster up on the wall, and it's Kyle Nelson, one of his fights from like plus 10 years ago. The guy's been around for a very, very long time. And, the reality is when someone does possess that kind of power, it's hard to take some chalk. I will present my spot, and I'm going to start with my spot that maybe I'm not my strongest of my three, but I'm going to fade a guy that's been ROI for a lot of us in the community. I'm going to fade Chris Curtis. I think that there's been a blueprint to show how to beat him. It's not nice, it's not pretty, but to be able to run away from him a little bit, mix it up on the cage a little bit, try to force takedowns, land shots, you make it greasy enough. And I just think Imavov has enough to be able to do it. I know that Curtis has a great takedown defense, but I think Imavov will be able to actually, draw him in, Curtis will be chasing him down, trying to land those big shots, and maybe even land a couple takedowns. So I like Imavov in this spot at minus 125. I mean, there could be some props that we might want to look at, but I just think that this fight is going to look a little bit similar to the Buckley fight. Because for me, I just think that with Strickland and Imavov, Strickland doesn't really overcommit, right? He throws a jab, steps back out, throws a jab, steps back out, little 1-2 combinations, doesn't overcommit. And I think that's the opposite with Curtis. So I'm definitely going to go with Imavov on this one, but I was talking in the back room with Nick about possibly a live bet with Curtis. And I know that's always there. He's always live in the third round for a big finish. That's something that you may want to look at even to bet prior if that's really what you want to do. But I'm on the Imavov side. I think that minus 125 works for me.
It's probably a fight I'd rather tackle from an over perspective. I don't find either one of these guys throws a lot of volume. And even with Curtis, like I said, like the Buckley fight, he was getting beat up the whole first round. And, Buckley gave him that opening in order for him to land that counter. And I said, there's just not a lot of volume on either one of these guys. I don't really have a strong lean either way from a money line perspective. So I probably look at it as an over, depending on how juiced it would be.
Yeah, I think that an over could definitely be a parlay piece. I think that fight definitely does go over. But Weezy, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think an overplay isn't bad at all here. So we have seen Nasruddin Imavov in 16 fights, finished only once, and it was by submission. And you guys know as well as I do that Chris Curtis isn't submitting anybody.
No.
I don't even know if the dude's ever put on a gi in his life. So he's going to knock you out if anything. And we've seen Nasruddin in there with some hitters. We've seen him in there with some good top level competition here at the UFC level. So I think an over for that fight is actually something that I would be looking at, seeing where it opens and then determining if there's some value there. But Chris Curtis, definitely a finisher, but it's going to be by knockout if he knocks you out. And like you just said, I think we figured out now how to fight Chris Curtis and really piss him off. And Chris Curtis is an emotional guy. And that's something that you can absolutely use against any fighter. You get in their head, you fight in a way that pisses them off. And even more importantly, plays to their weaknesses, because Chris is a counterpuncher, so if you don't bring the fight to him and you're a tall, long middleweight going up against a guy who's up a weight class, who does have shorter arms, who kind of needs to be in the pocket to do his best work, we could see Imavov just kind of like teep kicking him and jabbing him from a distance and just moving those feet. And you'll see Chris Curtis throwing shit when he gets back in his corner in the first and second round. So I like an over here. And Imavov and Curtis, I'm surprised. They have the same reach, but Imavov's 4 inches taller, 5 inches taller. So I would go with an over for this fight.
Yeah, and definitely, I think with Curtis, when he starts to get mad in there, I don't think that plays well in any judge's eyes. I think when you start throwing a temper tantrum, you're throwing it for a reason, and judge is going to start to look at the other guy as the victor when it's a close fight. So if that starts to happen again, that's what I'm saying. I think we're going to see similar Imavov to the Buckley fight. Maybe be able to time a takedown, but stay on the outside and pick where he needs to. And then on top of that, Curtis, I think the blueprint is there. So Weezy, what do you have as far as a spot? You're taking a look at the picks. I know it's early, and all of our picks may change by the time fight week comes. We don't know exactly what's going to be happening, but for you, what's your spot?
So I'm looking at this Miranda Maverick Jasmine Jasudavicius fight, and when I mean, like if you wanna piss away your entire bankroll, just bet every juiced women's favorite and see what happens at the end of the year. You're going to be destitute, right? So whenever I see a women's favorite that's sitting up around minus 300, the very first thing I look for is, does the underdog have a path? And am I kidding myself about the path, or is there a legitimate path there? Okay. Jasmine Jasudavicius, right? Her striking is terrible. Let me break down the distance striking numbers here. She lands 3.3 per minute and absorbs 7.11. What's the accuracy? I have her accuracy. Oh, yeah, she couldn't hit water if she fell out of a boat. 32.7%. Only 52% distance striking defense. She gets hit a ton. She's not accurate. She doesn't throw a lot of volume. But man, can she wrestle, right? And guess what? Miranda Maverick has 44% takedown defense. Miranda Maverick has been absolutely smothered in the past by women who have grappled her. Miranda Maverick's given up 10 takedowns in only 6 UFC fights, and she's being controlled about 25% of the time. So Miranda Maverick is winning about 52% of the control time positions that she's been in the UFC, but she's got more takedowns than her opponents do, and she's attempted more takedowns than her opponents do, and she's very accurate, 62% takedowns. But check out Jasmine, 47% control time for, 5.7% control time against. Jasmine's attempted 17 takedowns. Her opponents have attempted 11. So it's not like Kay Hansen wasn't trying to get Jasmine down and win minutes on the ground. She wasn't successful. Jasmine can really fucking wrestle, and Miranda Maverick doesn't have great takedown defense. We haven't seen Miranda Maverick now in 6 months, and it was against Shanna Young, so it didn't really tell us much. You're going to put a plus 250 in front of me for a women's underdog, and this women's underdog can wrestle and can win minutes with that style, and she knows her striking sucks. So it's not like she's just going to go out there and box with Miranda Maverick. This is going to become a grappling match. And if Jasmine gets top position, she's going to eat up minutes. She's going to land ground and pound. And Miranda might not have an answer for it. So I'm thinking at plus 250, it might be worth a shot.
That is actually my dog of the week, sir. And as much as I wanted to try to hide my Canadian bias, the way that you're talking about the wrestling is really, you're going to give me Jasmine's wrestling at plus 250, then we're having a conversation, right? And although I know that everybody's pretty hard on her striking, and Natalia Silva really is the real deal.
Oh, yeah.
And her footwork was just absolutely stellar in that fight and caught Jasmine completely off and made her striking worse than it was. But Miranda Maverick doesn't have that footwork. She doesn't. And she does get taken down, and you're right. Although it was Blanchfield that took her down 7 times in that fight. So it was sort of skewed by one woman. I think that Jasmine's wrestling is right up there with any woman in the division.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of female fighters, and Jasmine did go down to American Top Team and trade down there for a while, they're training with a lot of women. They actually are in their gyms at that level. And Jasmine's not. Jasmine's in Niagara Top Team. She's training with guys like Tisha Guthrow, who's on Unified, probably going to have a belt soon. She's training with guys like Cody Trevanchuk. These are all names that nobody fucking knows right now. They're all names of killers that are coming up right now that you're likely going to see on Dana White Contender Series. Kevin Popovich. She's rolling with Mike Malott. They're down at Ouroboros down the street from here, and they're grappling nonstop. So like there's grappling going on. She's training like mad. Like you see video of her. She's getting punched in the face and sparring with dudes nonstop. So she's a gamer. And yes, the striking isn't where a lot of other people are, but the wrestling, like you're saying, Weezy, you're 100% right. At plus 250, her control time was something I actually was going to ask you, and you already beat me to the punch on that. She had great control time in her last fight, and I think you're going to see some control time in this fight. And I think this is going to get greasy. And I think if you had these two ladies fight 10 times, I don't know where the line is on who wins how many times. So for me, give me that plus 250. I'm in on it. Jasmine's dog of the week. I'm right with you. And I guess that's going to be a dog play now that we got 2 on board. Nick, I know what your thought's going to be. Nick's whole line when it comes to women's MMA is?
Over 2.5.
Yeah. 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 And for this fight, it's a great spot too. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I agree with pretty much what Weezy said, though. I will never lay chalk on women's MMA minus 300. As you said, there's a clear path. Sorry, my cat is going fucking nuts. Yeah, there's a clear path to victory for Jasmine. And I said, like, I think Miranda's good, and I think she does win this fight, but there's no way in hell I would ever lay that type of chalk on her. So I'll agree with you, boys. I'll probably put a small bet on Jasmine anyways, probably by decision, just to add an extra 10 points or whatever it's going to be. But yeah, it's women's MMA is something, unless I really have a strong take, I stay far away from because I get burned more than I do not.
But Nick, what's your next spot?
All right, so speaking of dogs, I'm gonna go with Nate Landwehr. I think it's lined incorrectly. I think whenever it comes to Dan Ige, if you look at his last couple fights, like obviously Damon Jackson was a good win for him, but he gets taken down a lot. And I'm not saying Nate Landwehr is a great wrestler or anything, but he's the type of fighter that can mix it up very well. And Dan Ige, to me, is the type of guy that does not like to be in pressure fights. It's kind of similar to the Chris Curtis situation where, he likes to land that clean counter and put you away. And Nate Landwehr, man, the guy can take an absolute beating and just keep coming. We look at the David Onama fight where he just got his ass handed to him and came back to win that fight. And I see a lot of similarities in what we're going to see here. I honestly like the plus 175 you're getting on him. That line seems to keep dropping. And I think by the time we get next week, or by the time we get to next week and people keep looking into it, it's probably going to change a little bit more. And I said, it's just because durability, man. Like, this guy just comes out to fucking fight. And I don't see Dan Ige getting him out of there. And I see this being a very close, contested fight. And if you're going to give me plus 175 to plus 200 on the dog, I'm on Nate Landwehr all day.
It'll be interesting to see how they approach the over-unders on this fight. That would be something I might be potential to look at. Landwehr's always potential to be a dog, right? Ige gets in firefights and potentially could get knocked out. I know it was on Damon Jackson last time. Ige fought Jackson, and I mean that didn't end up going too well. I know Ige presents that power and can put your lights out pretty quick. So, what's your take on that one, Weezy?
Yeah, I remember when I was listening to Santino DeFranco and Brandon Olivas do their podcast, they were talking about what the Korean Zombie had said about Dan Ige. And the Korean Zombie said, I've never been hit as hard as I've been hit by Dan Ige. And I was like, are these guys tripping? Really? Ige? But yeah, dude, I mean, you saw what he did to Gavin Tucker, man. That was unbelievable. Nobody saw that coming, and he does have one punch power, and we saw it against Jackson as well. I mean, the guy hits very hard. But Landwehr's very durable. Dan Ige's durability is legendary. So I would probably lean for an over in this fight, but I think it'll be juiced. What I would be really interested to see is how would Ige deal with Landwehr's pressure? Because I think that Ige might want to wrestle, but he's not taking down Landwehr, dude. The guy's takedown defense is legendary. It's so good. Before he was in the UFC, this dude was one of the only Americans stupid enough to take fights in Russia. And like the stories that you hear about taking fights in Russia or in Japan are just fucking hilarious about how they fuck with you. Like the old Pancrase stories are like, these Americans would go over there and they'd show up like on fight day. And before fight day, they would change the opponent literally 6 times on them. And then they would be like walking out to the cage and be like, oh yeah, you know what? You're fighting the guy you were originally slated to fight, before we did 14 changes in front of that, Landwehr. Yeah, I know Landwehr was doing that, going out to Russia and kicking these dudes' asses. They were trying to grapple fuck them unsuccessfully. And those Russians can grapple fuck just about anybody, They were bringing Nate Landwehr in to lose. And it got to the point where they almost fed him to Evloev. And that fight never happened. But if Landwehr just shows Ige no respect and walks forward, this could be a problem for Dan, because if Dan panic shoots on Nate Landwehr, his front choke series is absolutely fantastic. So I'm looking at a plus 210 number on Nate Landwehr. I want to see where that goes. That's interesting to me.
You even threw something out there right there, Nate Landwehr by submission, but that might be if the dog money is not there. If that's not a bad prop either.
Yeah, because you're not knocking out Dan Ige, So I think if the way you can't like my guy Liam says, you can't tough guy a choke. Everybody needs to breathe, no matter how tough they are. So, but the next spot that I'm going to give you guys, is just something that I'm seeing. I don't know where this thing is going to open. I don't know where the data's bringing us, but how about a Marc-Andre Barriault versus Eric Anders over bet, right? Because as we're talking about Khalil Roundtree, do you fucking remember that Roundtree Anders fight where he just beat 7 shades of shit out of Anders for 3 full rounds, and Anders never quit, never once quit, kept going? Like, Anders is tough as a $2 steak, and so is Barriault. Now, Barriault just got finished by Anthony Hernandez, but I think he broke his rib in that fight, and I think that's why that happened. And Hernandez is an absolute nightmare to deal with, but I don't think Marc-Andre Barriault is finishing Eric Anders, and I don't think Eric Anders is finishing Marc-Andre Barriault. And because they're middleweights, we might be able to get a little plus money on an over there potentially, maybe. So we'll see what's where that opens. But that's a spot that I like because both of these guys are very durable.
If Barriault comes in with some pressure and Anders sort of may even lean on him on the cage, and he likes to spend some time there, right? So. Yeah, lean all the way to over 1.5. Not a bad spot at all.
Or 2.5 even.
Or true. Nick?
Yeah, honestly, that's another spot I was looking at too. It seemed to me like one of these spots that not like obvious, but it's just where do you really see that going, right? I see so much cage control of them just kind of flipping each other back and forth. I do not honestly see it being an entertaining fight. I'm kind of surprised that it's on the main card. I think there's other fights, even if you put the Kyle Nelson fight on the main card, that fight's going to be entertaining. So I have to agree with you over, man. I think it's a great spot. It's probably going to be a relatively slow fight, and it's probably going to be pretty close whenever it comes to the judges. So I like if fight goes the distance over 2.5 and all of it.
I like it. I think that Weezy, that may have to be your sort of lead play or your sharp play for the podcast there.
Yeah, it could be a good one, but then again, they might open it at minus 250 and people will be like, look at that prick Weezy telling me he likes the fucking over, and then they got it at 70% implied probability.
But here's the thing. If you're pointing people in the right direction the moment the books open, then and they don't figure it out when we throw 3 or 4 different spots for them to look at, then they can kick rocks.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's what you got to do, man. You got to find the spots. There's always, and it's kind of interesting. This week, we've got that Daniel Santos versus Johnny Munoz fight, and when the line opened, Santos was minus 140, Munoz was plus 120. Then the steam came in on Santos. They figured it out. The fight got canceled. They reopened it up, and now the books know what we want. And now it's just going crazy. It's like Santos minus 220, minus 230. My fight day might be minus 250. And as gamblers, it's always about the number. You can't let your personal biases get in the way. So I think really good gamblers, they'll bet on Santos at minus 140, but then when they see him at minus 220, they'll be like, fuck it, I'll take Munoz at plus 185. It's always about the number, because you always want to make this a long-term game. It's not just this weekend. It's the weekend after that and the one after that. And it's all the lessons that you learned before this weekend. And it's all about having fun, making money, doing something that you love, watching fights. And in order to do that, you got to be disciplined. You got to plan ahead. And you got to always concentrate on the number, not the desired result.
Yeah,
well
100%,
said,
man.
Weezy. Well said, Weezy. Yeah, no, it's a little bit surreal. I'm listening to you talk on here. Like I was saying, we started this podcast. Initially, I had done a couple podcasts with Josh Hill, and then we turned it into a gambling and betting podcast. And, this has been going for almost 2 years now. And it's just been the past couple months where things are starting to pick up, things are starting to roll, and we're starting to get a little bit, it's not about recognition, but we both want to grow the channel and be able to do this. And obviously, everybody wants to be able to make money, not even just in the gambling factor, be able to monetize the podcast and be able to spend more time, spend more time on tape, spend more time on content, and get things out as early as possible so people can, enjoy, whether it is an interview with different fighters and or, getting lines out as early as possible and breaking down hot spot or sharp spots right away. So Weezy, thank you very much for coming on. Before you leave, though, we are going to actually go through and see if we can figure out a quick parlay. And obviously, we don't have lines yet. These are things that are going to be a parlay to look at, whether it's an over-under that we can pick with a definite spot. But on the full card, where do you guys think we could pick, maybe a 2 or a 3-piece parlay? You guys can just start talking, brainstorm it as we go.
I was going to say the violent spots in the Oliveira fight, the violent spot in the Malott fight. I mean, like, it's hard to see either of those fights hitting the scorecards. A Malott, maybe fight doesn't start round 3. Maybe like a fight doesn't start round 3 for Oliveira. I think those are 2 potential parlay pieces where
I like that. The violence parlay for the week. What do you think about that one, Nick?
Yeah, I like it a lot, man. I also like the over, as Weezy was saying, the Anders fight.
And a prop that I'm actually going to be looking at, the last one that I'll be looking at would be on the Mike Malott spot, actually round 2. I want to see what the round 2 is because I want to give Adam Fugitt a little bit of respect because he is at a level. And if it does slip into the second round and Mike realizes that maybe we got to make this a little bit more of a longer game, he finishes him in the second round, boom, Mike Malott, second round prop. But that'll be something we'll see when it comes out if there's enough value on it because they expect it to end in the first round. So that's something that I want to see where it's at. But yeah, so I think the violence spot, I'll put it out on Twitter and I will definitely share it out to you, Weezy. We will put out the violent. So we'll likely maybe go with a 2-piece or I don't know what do you think? The over is a good thing to add to that, Nick? I think we just leave it with the Mike Malott and Oliveira fights, violence, and see where that goes. I think it might be a little bit of a chalky piece, but I think it hits.
Yeah, you probably
we can always bring it to like fight doesn't start around 3 or under 2.5 or something 100%. Like that.
Yeah, bring it in. Then you probably get close to plus money with the 2, maybe minus 150. So it's not too bad at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's all about winning, right? You start chasing these things and you start losing. So
Yep.
So just to look at the spots again that I think that sort of jumped out was the over on the Anders and the Barrio fights. Looking at Belbita and maybe even a takedown, and even just looking at her as the dog now. I get that the market moved one way, but the things that we talked about with the wrestling and talking about also just the volume. I'll take plus money on 2 girls that are even going to bang. If they're going to just throw down in the middle of the octagon, then I'm going to take the plus money in a lot of cases anyway. So. We'll go with Belbita on that one, at least as far as the takedown. And then Jasmine Jasudavicius, the big dog of the week. If you're going to give me plus 250 on her wrestling and her pedigree, I just think that she's going to be able to get Maverick down at least 2 to 3 times. Maybe out of one of those times, she gets good control time. At least hangs with her a little bit on the feet. I think Maverick will have her on the feet as well too. But I just think it's a live dog. So we'll take that. If we see her in the crucifix position, me and Weezy are sitting with tickets just laughing our ass off.
Yeah.
Right. And that could very well happen. So look forward to that one. And Weezy, everybody knows where to find you. Anybody that's watching us on our podcast right now knows where to find you. You are on Pub Sports Radio, MMA Weezy on Twitter, and then also have Just the Tip on your YouTube channel as well too. But I do want you to talk, because we didn't get to record it. Talk about what you're doing with the engine and what you're doing now with the stats and really getting a lot more intricate with it and bringing a new wrinkle to betting.
Yeah, I just created a new spreadsheet that, the one that you see on Stat Diggers, the one that you see on Just the Tip has, the matchup stats for each fighter kind of like side by side, so you can see what they all do. But now I've changed it so that not only are you seeing, like, for instance, Andre Barrio, he lands 5.76 distance strikes per minute and he attempts 14.72. But at the end of the day, what does that really mean? Well, I've put in, because I've gotten all of the divisional analytics, right? So now I know, for instance, that the average fighter in the middleweight weight class is landing 4.11 distance strikes per minute. So now you see Marc-Andre Barrio with 5.76, but then next to that, you see a green square because he's above average, and it tells you how many above the average or below the average for the weight class that he is. So it's adding a new level of analysis to the stats that I already put out, because now not only does it tell you what a fighter does, but it also compares them to the benchmark for the division. So you can determine pace. You can determine where a fighter's weak spots are and where the strong spots are by just looking at the heat map on the stats where green is good, red is bad, and yellow is average. So I'm really excited to offer that going forward. You're going to be seeing these stats on Stat Diggers. You're going to be seeing these stats on Just the Tip. But most importantly, people can join my Patreon, and I get these stats out 3 weeks in advance of every event. So, it's really a huge tool to be able to do that statistical work before you do the tape study, so you can know what to look for when you're studying tape. And so I'm really excited to launch this and show it to everybody in the weeks going forward.
And with you having those comparisons to the average of the divisions and breaking that all down, and then having everything color coded, it almost like makes it, when people are looking down the book and trying to see where they want to pick their spots, it just, you can see some spots jump out at you right away through statistical data like that as well too. So it's amazing that you're doing that. As much as we love digging into stats and digging into tape, you got to support Uncle Weezy. Get out there, get on the Patreon as well too. As far as memberships for things like this, people are like, why pay for this like this? Why pay for that? Well, are you going to do the work? If you're not going to do the work and you want to go make the picks, it's one thing we banter back and forth on podcasts and everything else, but this man has been digging in for the past 2 years and building and, adding another layer to it, making it better and better. And you're never going to be stopping with this. You're going to be tinkering with this till the end of time.
Exactly.
But the passion, right?
I'm Uncle Weezy. You can find me on Pub Sports Radio. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Uncle Weezy. And you can find the Don't Tap podcast guys right here on their channel, where we're breaking down fights every single week.
I'm Mike Malott.
Tune into the Don't Tap podcast.
Don't tap.
Podcast.
Follow me on Twitter.
Okay, so been probably about 2 weeks since I've seen you. I know the intense part of camp has happened since then, and a lot of the game planning. I just love to know how the camp has been for you. This is probably one of the more intense camps, I would imagine. The amount of your teammates that are fighting, with Anthony Romero going to the PFL, there's just so much going on in Southern Ontario. It's absolutely amazing. So speak about the energy and how it's been for you in the past couple of weeks.
The energy's been amazing. As you mentioned, there's 4 of us from this area fighting at UFC 289. We've got Jasmine Jasdavicius, Kyle Nelson, Deanna Belbita. So we're all fighting on the same card. We've all been putting in a lot of work, training either together or in the same rooms. Then on top of that, like you said, Anthony Romero's fighting in PFL. He's got a huge fight coming up. Then locally, Harlow. Then locally, we've got BTC coming up. We've got Unified coming up. So there's a ton of guys in the area who are all getting ready for fights at the same time. I just came from BTC, the Saturday afternoon sparring session. I'm a week out from the fight, so I'm not sparring. Sometimes I'll spar a week out, sometimes I won't. It depends on how camp went. Like, this camp went great. My sparring, I got a ton of sparring in this time, ton of live grappling, so I don't feel like I needed to cram one more session in. But, if it's a short notice fight, or if there's been, some things out of your control, injuries, whatever, and you haven't been able to get the work in, then getting one extra one can help. So I just went and watched sparring and then hit mitts with Cruellin, and you've seen how that goes. So that was nice and intense. I feel great going into this one, man. I feel like I really have done everything possible. Like, I feel like we've turned every stone. I feel like every question that should be asked has been asked. I feel like.
So let's ask some of those questions, actually. So, because there's people out there, there's fans that are going to say, Mike Malott's the finisher, and you and I have talked about this, pretty extensively. But Mike Malott's the finisher. They're looking at the fight going to be under 2.5, or the fight's going to end early. Not even the gambling side of things, just being a fan. I think that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. What does Mike Malott look extended? Because I know we talked about it last camp, and you said that the cardio has come along so much. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean to have your cardio, starting to elevate as you're now training for bigger camps, and you're able to retain more? Talk about the cardio and where that is now.
It's funny because I have, of my 9 wins, all 9 of them are first round stoppages, but I think I get better as the fight goes on. I think I get better as we get into deeper waters. And I just don't think people have been able to see that yet. I think the thing that I tend to do really well is capitalize upon mistakes, and also force guys into situations where they're bound to make a poor mistake, or make, at very least, the lesser of 2 bad decisions, until we get to a checkmate position. So I think because of that, I've got the first round stoppages, but I don't have that style where I'm like chaotically sprinting for the finish. Especially like you get like some new guys to the UFC who've kind of run through everybody. They're used to getting first round finishes. They sprint. They give everything they've got for the first like 7 minutes, and they're used to guys just folding under that pressure. You get to the UFC and you realize that there are tough guys with lots of experience, guys who can kind of take that, and some dudes crumble when people don't fall from getting hit with their best shots. So you start seeing them struggle, right? They tend to not have the same success. I'm not one of those guys. I'm the guy who gets better as fights go deeper. I don't just have a few tricks that I rely on. I don't just explode and sprint at guys and try and overwhelm them for the first couple of minutes until, we both start getting tired. Like I have different chapters to my game, and I think we did a really good job of developing each of those this camp. And I brought in a few different sparring partners, guys I hadn't sparred with before, some southpaws, one who's a professional Muay Thai fighter, fought for one championship, and another UFC veteran, and some other really high-level guys. And all of them said the same thing. They were like, wow, you really picked up the pressure and the pace as the fight went on, or as the rounds went on, and you had very different looks between rounds. So that's something I'm excited to show if we're able to go past the first round. And if I get that first round finish, which, history says that's the most likely scenario.
That's the bet.
Yeah, that's the bet. Then great. Then I'll keep some cards in hand. I've been keeping cards in hand my whole career. There are things that I view as like, I mentioned this last time. We spoke before my last fight. There are things in my game that I consider to be like my A game that a lot of people haven't seen yet. Things that I lean on almost every sparring session or every live situation session when we're going hard. Those are things that I tend to go to that no one's really seen yet because there hasn't been a necessity to show them. And then I'm not out here trying to, I think some people are like, oh, I've been working on this. I'm excited to show this. Like, I'm not showing you anything. I don't care about showing. I care about getting
Let it come.
Like, yeah, whatever tools I think are going to get the job done for me, I'm going to lean heavily on those. And if you watch the Contender Series fight, the Mickey Gall fight, and the Johan fight, you see like 3 kind of different fighters. And it's not because I change my style dramatically every single training camp and I'm trying to be a completely different guy. It's because I have different weapons and I just try to use what I think is most effective for each fight.
Well, actually, it's good you even bring that up. Like in the Mickey Gall fight, I don't know if it was maybe that you didn't respect his striking as much. He did tag you a couple of times. Obviously, the patented Mike Malott, blood lick on the face and everything else. But then if you look at it, you didn't want to, you played the right game against Johan. There's adjustments made, right? Like whether it's adjustment or a different game plan based on a different guy with power, but you went in there and showed that you can run a distance game plan and let it come to you and you take him down. And I know that's even something you talked about like in training and stuff that I'm not even going to be mentioning, but there is so many wrinkles to the game that why would you show it? Why do you need to show your hands? Let things come as they come, and then when opportunities present themselves, show your best shit at the top levels, right? That's the idea, right? So, and talking about your actual opponent, Adam Fugitt, I saw a couple interviews with him, and he was talking about your ability to be able to, first respecting your power, then your ability to be able to create space even in the pocket with how you move and be able to sort of land those hooks and land those uppercuts. So he's looking at small frame of reference, probably from the Mickey Gall fight for the most part. For you, what do you think? We talked about this once in the room. What do you think he presents? He seems like he at least as far as a game plan, he wants to spend time at a distance and sort of keep that range, at least for what he's saying anyways. What do you think he presents as far as any problems for you at all?
Well, he's fairly well-rounded from what I've seen. So he has strength in all assets of the game, all disciplines of the game. I don't see too many things that stand out as like something that's overly terrifying. As long as you stay disciplined against him, he's a good fighter. But I don't see
like Johan's power, for instance, like not something that's jumping out at you to make you adjust game plan based on it.
Right, or Mickey's back attack, right? So Mickey's a backpack when he gets on the back. He's an excellent strangler. 6 of his 7 wins had come from rear naked choke. And then Johan, crazy one-punch power, not necessarily a finesse striker. but has a ridiculous amount of power in his hands and is not afraid to really throw it. I would say this opponent is more well-rounded than either of my previous two opponents in the UFC, but not having necessarily any areas like that are super concerning. He's also southpaw, which is unique to the opponents that I've fought in the UFC so far. He also has a long reach. As far as the reach and the size is concerned, everyone I've fought inside the UFC so far, including Contender Series, has been taller than me, had a longer reach than me, and I would assume heavier than me on fight night. So that's not like a major concern. I've dealt with that 3 of 3 times with 3 first-round stoppages, so that's not like a major concern. And the only things that could present themselves as obstacles with a reach advantage we've addressed consistently this camp. I see him trying to really pressure when the fight doesn't go his way, like trying to make it messy. And he's pretty good at that, but in trying to make things messy, he gets messy. He creates openings and makes mistakes. So I think, like I said, I think I'm one of the best guys in the UFC at capitalizing upon mistakes. I think when he does make that mistake, or when I force him to make one, the fight's over, or the fight dramatically changes. But yeah,
So it seems like
he's like a solid dude, tough, probably be in good shape. He'll probably be pretty strong. He's kind of like moves kind of awkward, but like he's technical. So he's a good opponent. He's a good opponent, but I just feel like there isn't an area where I don't have him covered. You know, like he's a good all-around guy. He's a great guy to bring in for me to put on a performance against him. Like, he fills his role very well, and I think his role in this is to be a dance partner for me. Like, I need an opponent, and he simply kind of fills that role.
he's so eloquently, so nicely and politely and Canadian like again, disrespect your opponent. So yeah, I mean, it seems like with Mickey Gold, you know, you're talking about the backpack. I always talk about your fight IQ, right? You've broken down fights. I've listened to you talk, and you pretty much broke down how you were going to win the last fight, and I didn't even catch fully all of it. And you went to the round and to your #1 win condition that would make sense against Johan, which was the ground game. Against Mickey Gall, obviously, you want to keep it on the feet, maybe take a couple shots. It is what it is, but you were willing to bang and get in there and get him to make a mistake and catch him on a counter. Now we have a guy who's more well-rounded, so it seems like you're more just ready to go wherever you want it to go. And as a guy who watches a lot of fucking tape, I'm going to say this one might go a little bit over. I'm going to get crazy with it and maybe say this fight goes over 1.5. I'm going to get crazy with it. But either way, if I counter with that, you know, Mike Malott KO, then we're good to go. But we'll get off the gambling side of things. And I want to, well, there's a little bit about the lines. You have 2 teammates right now that are being pretty disrespected as far as the lines. We got Jasmine Jazz the Vicious. We got Kyle Nelson. I get it, Blake Builder. There's a little bit of hype behind him coming up, and I get that he does have a pretty high level and pedigree. But I just think that Nelson's being completely disrespected here with the line. I think that his power, his striking, and now his and I know he's been around for a long time, but it's been the last couple of years. His grappling ability is like leaps and bounds way better than what it was. Mm-hmm. So speak about Kyle Nelson first, and then we'll get into Jasmine.
Kyle's a beast, man. We started this journey pretty early on together. I met him when I think we were both 2-0 through LN, and he's been working this whole time. Like, he doesn't really take time off, even in that 1.5 year layoff or whatever it was between fights with the UFC. He was in the gym every day. He's a high-level striker. He's a high-level grappler. His wrestling has made serious improvements. He's super strong. His squeeze is ridiculous. And he's just very dangerous. Like, there isn't an area where you can really settle against him because he's got power, because he's got a mean style of striking. He's not the guy to like jab you to death. He's not a guy to like outpoint you and just squeak out rounds. Like, he's kind of got that like Cheeto Vera-esque style of striking to him where everything he does is mean and hurts. And he might not like out-volume you, but he's going to like stomp on your knees, and he's going to calf kick you, and he's going to toe stab you, and He's got ridiculous power in his overhands and his hooks, and like everything. Whenever you get in range with that guy, you have to be careful. So for that reason alone, there shouldn't be a massive. Shouldn't be a massive underdog in my opinion. And then Jasmine Jasudavicius.
Now, one second with the Jasmine line. She's plus 250 right now. And I had brought a capper on from Chicago to sort of curb our Canadian bias, because I was going to go in on, backing the three of you, and then also Diana Belbita as well too, because I see the opportunities there, especially with where the lines are. It's like disrespectful. Kyle's power, and then talking about Jasmine's wrestling is not plus 250. I get in the striking battle. We can go back and forth on what the lines are going to be. But her wrestling is, I think, some of the highest level in the female division. That's my opinion. I love the way that she approaches her wrestling. When she gets you, she doesn't let you go, and she's going to get you down to the ground, and she's going to make you pay, but she's not going to give up position. In the interview that we had, she's never going to compromise her situation once she gets there. Yeah. So speak about Jasmine. I know she's been grappling with you like crazy at Earl's Spoils, BJJ. I know that she's been working like a madman. And the one thing I brought up too, she's training with mostly guys. She's getting punched in the face, and her sparring partners are mostly guys. She's wrestling and grappling with mostly guys. Plus 250, I'll take it. Jasmine Jasudavicius, the dog of the week.
Yeah, that's a surprising line. I don't know Miranda Maverick very well.
She gets taken down.
I don't know. She gets taken down? Oh, okay.
Blanchfield took her down 7 times.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, Blanchfield is an animal, but
I get it. But then Jasmine, what did we say? Jasmine takes you down 3 or 4.
Jasmine's an animal too, though. Like that's that's surprising that Jasmine would be the underdog in that one. The only thing I know about Miranda Maverick is she's the worst nickname in mixed martial arts. Just absolutely brutal. How do you ruin a name like Miranda Maverick? You don't need a nickname. You sound like a comic book character already. Like, just be Miranda Maverick. But yeah, that's surprising to me that Jazz is such a big underdog. I honestly thought, I guess Miranda, she's ranked, isn't she, Miranda Maverick?
She's ranked. She's been around. She's had some pretty big fights. So it's more like a strength of schedule situation. But I just think when you look at strength of schedules, but then you look at the wrestling pedigree, as soon as Jasmine closed the difference, like this isn't Natalia Silva, right? Like that was the issue Jasmine had with trying to get her on the footwork. We got caught off guard going into that fight. This one, like Maverick's footwork is not there. She gets taken down. She's there to be taken down. Jasmine's going to take her down, and that plus 250 is going to feel real nice.
Jazz has also made significant jumps in her footwork and in her movement. She and I did we were just doing like a warm up before sparring, just distance drill basically with your training partner and kind of play. I was like, holy shit, like she's getting hard to find. I'm like, dude, your footwork's gotten way better. She's like, yeah, man, I've been working on it a lot since that. Again, I can't remember the girl's name.
Natalia Silva.
I've been working on it a lot since that fight. I'm like, dude, I can tell she's really made some big leaps in striking and in movement that I didn't know she had made, really. Like, obviously it's hard because I don't spar with Jazz really. Like, she's a 125er in the UFC, and I see her in the room a lot, but I'm focused on what I'm doing, so I don't really like see. I'll sometimes, sometimes I'll look over or whatever and see her, and she always looks good, but I'm not like focused on her at practice. I'm focused on myself.
Of course.
But man, she's gotten a lot better. She's really good, and I think people forget like how young she is in the game. Like, I think they look at her age and they're like, oh well, she's like, you see somebody that age and you're like, okay, 33K, you're kind of the fighter you're probably going to be. But people forget she didn't start training until she was like 26, so she's really, really young in this game. Like, it's not like she's 33 and she's been training since she was 12. You're like 20 years in, and this is, for the most part, who you're going to be. It's like she still has, she's still kind of new to this journey, so she really is making big strides quickly. And then she's got world-class coaches and teammates that are helping her, right? And like you said, she spars with dudes, she rolls with dudes, and it's not, they're not like, I've seen some high-level women who spar with guys, and they really are like, no, you got to take it easy. I got to take it easy on me, and it's not like an even exchange. Like, she'll get in there and fight, and
she's wiping the blood off and getting back in. Like, I only see video, but I've watched her in some sessions where they showed like cuts and videos of her and Tisha and Cody, and like they get in there and they bang, man. Those guys aren't holding back, and
elite.
Yeah, and that was another thing I was trying to allude to with the capper from Chicago. He doesn't know who some of these guys are, and they're all about to crack into whether it's PFL, Bellator. You're going to see Popovic. You're going to see all these guys up there really, really soon.
I've been saying that for a long time. Like this area, Niagara Top Team especially, and like the guys who are really in that group. But there's a lot of guys who like come to train with the Niagara Top Team once or twice a week and are in this like, in this area and are kind of like Golden Horseshoe Combat Club. There are a lot of high level guys in that area that like give it 2 or 3 years. Wait until you start seeing Siri on the big stage. Wait until you start seeing Vinny Diaz on the big screen and Ergis Segeta and Bobby Poulter, and you're already seeing Anthony Romero take. He was like the top seed, absolute killer coming up. You're like, it's only a matter of time, and now he's in a major fight. And you got same thing with Aaron Jeffrey, where it's like, dude, how shit, he lost on Contender, like, but he's so good. Like, when's that breakthrough gonna happen? And then he signs a Bellator, has a great fight, then knocks out Austin Vanderford. And you're like, that's the guy we know. Like, that's who that guy is. That wasn't a fluke. He didn't just catch Vanderford. He's better than him by like a lot. So it's like, it's cool to see this happen in real time and see everybody come up and be one of the guys and kind of help lead the charge and
the sheer volume of talent right now is exciting as a Canadian fan. Like I remember being back I was at Queen's Park when we tried to make it legal in Canada, right? Like I even said to you, I was at one of your fights and didn't even realize it way back in the day.
Yeah.
And so for me, there was a handful of guys coming out, right? There was a handful of guys coming out back then. Most of them came from London, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like there's a huge crop of MMA fighters in Ontario, and it really is exciting. I know that you are preparing to probably packing up some stuff, slowly getting ready to prepare your mind and prepare, that last little bit to get over to Vancouver and get ready for your opponent. Lastly, on just on the end off here, I'm going to say second round, but Mike Malott, how do you see yourself? I mean, you're going to let it go wherever you want, but how do you see yourself finishing this fight?
I have 9 stoppages right now. All of them are in the first round, but I'm not super focused on the round. I'm focused on the way I've finished fights. So I have 4 knockouts and 5 submissions. 2 knockouts are by punches, 2 are by knees, 3 submissions are by strangle, and 2 submissions are by joint lock. I think I bring a really diverse skill set of fight finishing weapons to the cage. So
you're gonna
again
answer the question like a politician. It's okay. That's the way you should right now.
Yeah, man. I'm not honestly worried about the round. Like, you get that same first round knockout, that's amazing. We get to kind of continue the mystique, and people want to ask more questions, and people want to see fight more. We go to the third round, and I get a knockout or a submission in the third round. I finally get that 12, 13, 14 minutes of experience in the cage and become even more comfortable in the cage and feel the room a little bit more. There's no wrong answers here. The only thing I know is I will have 10 stoppages after this fight.
UFC 129, Mark Hominick comes out to one of the greatest entrances ever, and you've talked about it. I was there, you were there, almost every fighter we've talked about out of Ontario right now is probably there. Now you're going to be in Vancouver, 289. Your song plays, the tunnel's right there, you're just coming out, the lights are there, the fans are going crazy. You're on the main card of a pay-per-view for UFC 289. What does that feel like, brother?
Feels like what I've been visualizing since I was 13 years old. It's the reason I got into this. Looking around and seeing a sea of Canadian flags and Army 30,000 deep behind me, my 3 teammates having already fought. I've put the work in for nearly 20 years. I've been in this game for such a long time. We've turned over every stone. I've already won this fight, man. All we need to do is get in there. That's the odd feeling of peace getting into a cage where you're constantly every day looking forward to something. And when I step in the cage, it doesn't feel like there's anything after it. It feels like you're truly present. You're in the moment. And it's oddly peaceful knowing you're about to get in a violent fist fight in a cage on pay-per-view. But it makes me happy, man. I feel like loose when I get in there. My shoulders are loose. My hands are relaxed. My punches are flying. My kicks are flying. My takedown defense is on point. My shots and my body locks are perfect. I get on top. I land big strikes on top. I land elbows. I can cut them loose and let them back up to the feet, or I can smother on top if I get taken down. I'm impossible to hold down, and I'm dangerous off my back. You get swept, you get submitted. I stand up with strike, stand up and back to strike. I don't think there's anywhere in this fight this man can relax and feel comfortable, relaxing in front of me. So June 10th, I'm strong, stubborn, stable, smooth, smart, and cerebral. That's the way we're going.
And you could actually just see, you were running through that visualization there. You're visualizing all those strikes as you're doing it. It's good to see that you are very, very dialed in and locked in. I didn't expect anything less. We look forward to seeing you in the cage. You're going to be anchoring the Canadian team, finishing off the card, at least as far as your team and everybody else. Mm-hmm. But let's kill it. We didn't talk about Diana Belbita, and the one thing I will say, and just to sort of leave it off, Diana Belbita has been looks like she's been doing quite a bit of wrestling. And this is the stuff she's been putting on Instagram, and I'm thinking that might be a little bit of a wrinkle in the game that we'll see this time around. But she hits like a truck. Being in the room, she rumbles the walls, and looking forward to seeing her as well too. Just wanted to acknowledge her on the out as well too. There's your brother jumping on, so if you want to say hi to him quick.
Hey, what's up,
but everybody, thank you very much, Mike. We look forward to seeing you in the cage. We are hyped and really excited about the way the UFC is approaching you and putting you on the main card. We've been waiting for that guy, right?
Yeah. So
go in there, do what you do. I'm calling it. Mike Malott's going to come even more cerebral and maybe feel this out second round, either a KO or a club and sub. So Mike Malott, second round, call it.
Sounds good.
I'm Gentleman Josh Hill.
I'm Aaron Jeffrey.
I'm Johnson Jazz Busiest.
I'm Mike Malott.
I'm Rafian Stop.
Tune into
Don't Tap
Podcast.
Don't tap.
podcast.
John Jones.
Follow me on Twitter.
Hey, I'm UFC President Dana White, and you're in the ring with Callum McGregor.
To me, the Lions are the number one rankings out there. Those guys are the ones who really do their homework.
No, that's like saying the rankings are bullshit.
Got a really high fight IQ.
For this fight, I'm telling you, it's a flip of a coin. Levels to the shit.
So many high-level guys.
So, the line is crazy.
Oh, there we go. No, we're good. See, he's a pro.